So, very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of the philosophy, and we are discussing regarding the Roberts philosophy, the chapter the dose, and we have discussed two sessions on the dose, where H. Robert tried to explain the importance of the dose as Hahnemann have explained in his lifetime. The practical aspect of it he is trying to explain, and at the same time, the scientific aspect of it is also explained by him. Every time while explaining the concept of dose, he explained the Hahnemannian concept, and when he took the help of Organon, and with the help of Organon, he tried to explain Hahnemannian concept. So, what Hahnemann has said, when you are dealing with the patients, if you try to use the crude form or medicine in crude form, it is generally inert, never used to produce the desired results. But if you use it as you make it infinitesimal, you try to make it more and more dynamic, it starts working and it starts producing its effects. So inert crude substances becomes active due to only because of just giving it in a dynamic form, or when you make it dynamic through the succussion or trituration, then it starts working. And that concept Hahnemann have tried to explain over there through its aphorism, and at the same time in his chronic diseases he has mentioned details about it. So last paragraph which we have discussed on page number 117, where he said about that Hahnemann said that he has explained it to his colleagues, but they were not accepting the condition. They were not understanding or digesting the Hahnemannian concept of dynamic medicine, and they were using it in crude form, producing the hazardous effects of it. So this is very important thing which he tried to explain over there, and that paragraph we have finished. Now he takes the help of the Bonninghausen, and what he says, just go ahead with the paragraph on page number 117. That the Bonninghausen also passed through this roundabout route is witnessed by his words in his lesser writings, quoting from an earlier statement in homeopathy, a reader for cultivated non-medical public. Since I also led by the almost unanimous assertions as to the untenableness of this teaching, gave through only for a short time, larger doses, and with bad success. So, what he has said? He has said that in his early practice, Bonninghausen was also giving the larger doses on the principle of law of similars. He used to use the larger doses, but on the basis of law of similars. And he said that he has also suffered from the bad success. So he never got that success which he used to get after converting into Hahnemannian dynamic potency. Homeopathic doses is based upon law, as is the selection of remedy based upon law of similars. Action and reactions are equal and opposite. This is the fundamental. And it is this law that must guide us in the application of the drug. So this law is called as Newton's third law of motion. This law is also called as law of mutual action. Action and reactions are equal and opposite. Whole homeopathy is based upon it. If the disease has to happen, this law is applicable. So some stimulus happens, some thing at the dynamic level, either mental level, psychological level, emotional level, something happens. The action has happened, the reaction develops in the form of some disease. So again, when disease has to develop, this law is applicable. If it happens like so, then in the similar manner, when you have to produce the results at the same plane, producing a dynamic effect, then you must give medicine in the similar manner. You must give a stimulus which will not produce its primary action, but to that stimulus, the human body will react. Again, the law of mutual action works, and whatever remedy on the basis of law of similars you give it to the patient in dynamic form, it acts only just as a stimulus. So there is only action and reaction is reflected in the form of nature's law of cure. So this is the law applicable to the whole human being in the state of health, in the state of disease, in the state of recovery, and in the state of cure. And this he tried to explain that whole homeopathy guides us for homeopathy revolves around this specific law. The so-called primary action of the drugs and so-called secondary action of the drugs are manifest to any observer. As a common illustration, we may take the nausea and vomiting of ipecacuanha. 18 small doses, it is curative in sickness with nausea and vomiting as a prominent symptom. Others, if the other symptoms are agreeing. Opium causes profound sleep when used in the ordinary manner. 8. Opium is of infinitesimal value when given homeopathically in small doses in cases of profound coma. These instances cited are of the drugs classic in the massive doses or in common parlance, physiological doses for certain common states of sickness. So he has given simple example of opium. If you give opium in crude form, it used to produce a soporous state, a drowsy state. So patient becomes absolutely drowsy, sleeps a lot because of direct primary action of the crude drug substance. But if same opium, when you used homeopathically, either in 30, 200, depending upon situation and susceptibility of the patient, for a deep comatose person, where opium is the simillimum, you give opium in 30 or 200, and same opium we use to produce the soporous condition now acts in a different manner and bring that patient out of the comatose state. See, the properties varies. And why they varied? Because now it never works as a primary action. Now it works as just a stimulus to which the body has reacted. The vital force of the human being has reacted. And that's why patient comes out of that soporous or comatose state. So the action in crude form is rather different than in dynamic form. The physiological action of a drug, however, is nothing whatever to do with curative action from the homeopathic point of view, because homeopathic remedies are never used in physiological doses. This may seem at first illogical because we may use them in low potency. Yet, we never use them for their physiological effect. So what he is saying that whatever the remedy we used to use, generally we used to use it in dynamic form. So whenever we give belladonna, we never use belladonna berries. We give belladonna in 30 potency, 200 potency, 1M potency, like that. So in crude form, belladonna works as has poisonous effects in crude form whenever given. But same belladonna is very important remedy in severe headache. It is very good remedy in severe fever if the symptoms matches. So these are things which one has to understand. This is the difference one has to understand. So there is no question of primary action which we used to use in such types of cases, but it is secondary action for which we wait after giving the medicine. The physiological action is toxic in nature, therefore injurious to the patient. This sentence one has to understand. So if we give the Rustox mother tincture to the patient, it is toxic. It is named as poison oak. If we give aconite to the patient in crude form, it is a poison. So many drug substances in our materia medica in crude form works as a poison, but same produces a medicinal properties or acts as a medicine or remedy whenever based upon law of similars you prescribe them. The physiological action is toxic in nature, therefore injurious to the patient. The physiological action of a drug is not its therapeutic or curative action. It is the exact opposite of curative action and is never employed in homeopathic practice for curative purpose. The use of the drug in physiological form is an acknowledgement of the attempt to produce drug symptoms because of their primary action, and an acknowledgement also that the physician so using drugs has never observed the secondary symptom. Speaking of narcotic drugs in paragraph 113 of his Organon, Hahnemann has this to say, as these narcotic drugs destroy sensibility and sensation as well as irritability in their primary effect, a heightened state both of sensibility and irritability is frequently observed in healthy person as an after effect following the administration of narcotics, even in moderate doses. So what he is saying? He is saying that these are the medicines which we used to use in homeopathy. For example, the opium is there. There are many more narcotics we used to use, but we never use the larger doses or crude form. So we never use it as a painkiller. We never use morphine as a painkiller over here. We never use opium as a painkiller or in their primary action, but we used to use the remedy in a different form. We used to use it in 30, 200, 1 m, 10 m, 50 m, cm. What do we mean that? It is these are the medicines which are not in crude form, but which are in dynamic form, carries the energy. And because of carrying energy only, it is an invisible entity which is present over there, but having a power. So it is a power, it is an energy which against which the vital force reacts. So this is very important difference between the what allopathic medicine used to produce and what homeopathic medicine will use to produce. Homeopathic medicine, in their whenever you give for the proving or for the purpose of cure, never produces any pathological changes. They acts only at the functional level and produces functional reactions. This should be clear in everyone's mind. So if you would have given belladonna for the proving, it will show only a reaction against belladonna, but there will be no primary action of belladonna which you will going to see over there or observe over there. And what he further says, pathogenetic is the term used by the homeopathician as the more correct term for primary symptoms produced by the drug and as also as a synonym for the term toxic. In other words, symptoms may produce by massive doses or by crude drugs, but these symptoms are pathogenetic and not curative. So this is the terminology we used to use, pathogenetic symptom. So this is the symptom produced because of drug is a pathogenetic symptom. For example, if you would have given a belladonna in crude form to the patient, and when it is given, it directly produces colic inside the abdomen. That is because belladonna you have given in crude form. This is pathogenetic effect of a belladonna. If you would have given acid nitric in crude form inside the mouth of the patient and it corrodes, burns the tongue, it is the primary effect, pathogenetic effect of the acid nitric. So these are things which one has to understand. These symptoms may show forth family likeness, as many members of family under certain circumstances will often have similar general reaction. But to apply our knowledge of a drug as a curative measure, we must know definitely what its capabilities are. These capabilities cannot be manifest from the pathogenetic symptoms. What he is saying? These are the things one has to understand. If we must know what quality is there in the belladonna, then we have to prove it on healthy human being in potentized form. When we give belladonna 200, 1 m, 10 m to the patient and to the prover, the reflection comes out in the form of certain symptoms. Then you know, yes, this is quality of belladonna stimulus. That whenever you give belladonna, this reflection comes out. Whenever you give aconite, this reflection comes out. Whenever you give naxwamika, this type of reflection comes out. And your whole materia medica is the reaction of the patient against the stimulus of that specific drug. So those are not pathogenetic effects, but those are the reaction against the stimulus of that specific medicine. And this is the difference between two ways of applying the medicine. In crude form, it produces pathogenetic effects. In dynamic form, it never produces pathogenetic effects, but it is directly a reaction against the stimulus. These capabilities cannot be manifested by the from the pathogenetic effects, symptoms. The homeopathic cure is produced without drug effects. It is accomplished without suffering. It is mild. It is developed through growth. It is dynamic in nature. Therefore, it must be given on the dynamic plane and never in any way, never in a way to produce drug effects. Therefore, it must be the minimum amount of drug that will act upon vital force, which, as Hahnemann says, can scarcely be too small. So what he's saying that whenever you are using the homeopathic remedy to the patient and in the dynamic form, it never produces any drug effects. So there is no question that it has produced certain type of action on the body. It is just a stimulus. It is infinitesimal. And when you give it in small doses, there will be a reaction right from the conscience of the patient. It reflects, and that reflection is very important for homeopathy. It is not direct effect of the drug substance, but it is the reaction of the human economy from the stimulus of that specific drug in specific potency. And it depends upon susceptibility, it depends upon disease, it depends upon constitution, it depends upon miasm, it depends on many factors which you have to take into consideration. So, big difference between homeopathic application of medicine and allopathic application of medicine he is mentioning over there. In homeopathy, we used to use dynamic doses in order to treat the dynamic disease, whereas in allopathy, they used to use the pathogenetic effects, and because of which there is no cure, because nature's law of cure never works. And then further he says, we must remember in the dividing of the dose, no matter how far this is extended, there is something of the drug left. Matter is never destroyed. It may be changed in potentization, but an absolute zero is never reached. Here he takes the help of physics. And what physics says? Matter is indestructible. This is the law. This is the law Hahnemann is using. So when you try to make it fine and fine, you go on destructing, but it is never completely destructed. It has converted it in form, but it still remains. And that whenever you make it more fine and fine, you release more and more energy because you apply force externally, either during the process of trituration, either during the process of succussion. But this is very, very important, one must understand. And then he says, homeopathic dosages require that no symptoms shall be produced as a result of their administration, for these would be a drug effect. But we may find slight aggravation of the symptoms already present immediately following the administration of homeopathic remedy, which soon recedes and improvement continues. Only the single remedy in the smallest possible dose will assure in these happy results in this way. The suffering is quickly reduced, the strength is conserved, the patient is in a state of restored health. So see how nicely he is explaining. When you give homeopathically a remedy to the patient, it never produced its own effects. It is just a stimulus. And if it is perfectly simillimum, then nature's law of cure works. So then a weaker natural disease is permanently extinguished by the stronger medicinal disease. And that when it extinguishes the older one, it is taken up by the medicinal disease, which little bit produces an aggravation, which is called as a homeopathic aggravation. And then a process of cure starts. And the patient's strength is saved, conserved, and patient goes toward the process of recovery. We must not think that infinitesimal dose cannot produce symptoms. It is frequently found in very susceptible patients. In fact, the best provings are obtained with the high potencies on a susceptible person. So, if you give remedy not in repeated doses, it generally never produces directly many symptoms. But if the patient is a sensitive patient, hypersensitive patient, idiosyncratic patient, they are the best provers. They can give you many more symptoms, even though you prove that remedy in higher potency. And you get ample data from those patients, from those provers, and because of which your materia medica becomes more enriched. So symptoms, big symptom list which comes out of use of this medicine, and because of which the medicine becomes more and more stronger in action, and it used to work over the patient in such a manner. So he's explaining the concepts behind that, and he is explaining exactly how it works in the human being. And then he explains over there, when the homeopathic drug is administered, it is so similar to the natural disease that it therefore meets with the no resistance, because the sphere of its action is already invaded by the similar disease and its resistance overcome by the similar acting disease producing agent. The affected organ and tissues are open to attack. Susceptibility to this similar remedy is therefore greatly increased. The homeopathic remedy acts upon the identical tract involved in the disease states in similar way to the disease producing cause, in order that the suffering and distress may not be increased. It is therefore necessary to use only smallest possible dose. For this reason, the homeopathic dose is always short of the physiological and pathogenetic dose. It must be so small as not to produce too, too much aggravation of the symptoms already present, and never large enough to produce new symptoms. So what he is explaining? He is explaining that when you choose a right remedy in right potency. So if you have given that remedy to the patient depending upon totality of the symptoms, and you administered that remedy in a proper dose, what do you expect? If the case is acute, you are going to find it out homeopathic aggravation. That means you are going to see the original symptoms of the disease, they are getting aggravated for time being for certain hours, and then it disappears. In chronic disease, the things are different. You're not going to see the result immediately or aggravation immediately. It takes some time. It takes some time and then it starts working. So it takes some time, then it produces its effects, and gradually when patient has to recover after a week, after 10 days, after 15 days, after a month, after few months, then there will be homeopathic aggression just before the cure has taken place. So this is the difference between the homeopathic aggravation in case of homeopathy and homeopathic aggravation which happens to be there in chronic case. So acute case and chronic case, so the time of homeopathic aggravation rather differs. And then he further says, there is a law of doses as well as a law of cure. And when we use homeopathic remedy, it should be based upon that law. For if homeopathy means anything, it is that it is based upon natural law and order. This law is fixed and unchangeable. It makes no difference with the law if we do not follow it, but it does make a difference with our results. The quantity of action necessary to effect any change in nature is least possible. The decisive amount is always minimum and infinitesimal. Underline this law. This law is called as law of least quantity. This is 2 marks question as an MCQ in exams for the students. Law of least action. And very specifically he has mentioned the quantity of action necessary to effect any change in nature is least possible. This is the law. This is the law of physics. This is the law of chemistry and applicable in homeopathy. So see, law of minimum dose is based upon this law. It is not, it is in corollary with the law of least action. So law of minimum dose is in goes hand in hand with law of least action. And this law is nothing but the law which is scientifically proven. And what he says over there in that law, the decisive amount is always minimum and infinitesimal. The last sentence is very important. Decisive amount is very always a minimum and an infinitesimal, very small. So he is explaining about the dose in this chapter. Tomorrow we might finish this chapter and we'll understand the concept in detail. But in last 3 lectures, we have tried to understand what he wants to explain about the dose. And whatever the dose we used to use in homeopathy is always minimum infinitesimal. And why it should be minimum, that concept he tried to explain over there in this specific law. So that's all for today. And today evening, don't miss a lecture. I will going to take phosphorus from VIHMC Medica, a very important pathological aspect of understanding the phosphorus over there. So the first paragraph of phosphorus is very important from VIHMC Medica. Then you will understand the phosphorus and you will use it very easily. So thank you and be there at 8:50.
Thank you very much,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you.